fighting games. What an awesome genre. Beat the living crap out of your opponent, do some combos, some special moves. What's not to love? One of, if not the most famous fighting franchise, has to be Street Fighter. What started as a simple world tour to beat up different fighters and obviously not streets, became a huge cash cow for Capcom. Yeah, it had some detours along the way, but Street Fighter still carries on. But what happened to the first Street Fighter game? I mean, before Street Fighter 2 came along, it seemed like the series was non-existent. I know the game was released on the Wii's Virtual Console and Capcom Classic Collections Volume 2, but the first home portable gaming consoles that mostly nobody owned. They were primarily computer consoles like the Commodore 64 and the Amiga, but the most common port of Street Fighter 1 is on the TurboGrafx 16 CD add-on. And like most CD add-ons, it didn't go well. What was weird about it was called Fighting Street. Why? I played the arcade version years ago in Ocean City, and I'm pretty sure it was called Street Fighter. In fact, it sounds more like a beat-em-up game, kinda like Final Fight. And it's not like the name was changed for American audiences, the Japanese version also had the same title. Now that's what you call box art. Ryu vs Ninja Brian, Mount Rushmore, and not Balrog. I'll be using the Turbo Duo to play this, but as I said earlier, you can get it on the Virtual Console too. So, how was the first Street Fighter game? Was it a good game? Was it a bad game? Let's find out. This game blows! Well, to begin, the title screen is probably the quietest one I've ever seen. I mean, no sound for punching a wall? And the actual start screen, well, it's there, but we don't even get an option menu, just one player or player versus player. I should mention that the only playable characters are Ryu and Ken, and you can only play as Ken by setting up a two-player battle and beat Ryu. Ryu and Ken play exactly the same, so that's a lot of effort to get a palette swap. Why not just an option to pick Ryu or Ken? Instead of choosing characters, you select flags. Well, specifically nations. And with each, you get two opponents to fight against before you get this, I guess, a training montage, and two more fighters to face against. And let's go over the fighters in this game. In China, you face against... oh, come on. Can they make him even more stereotypical? Anyway, you fight against Lee and Gen. In America, we have Joe and Mike. Seriously. They had to change Balrog's name because it sounded close to Mike Tyson, but they couldn't change Mike in this. And not to mention, he fights just like Balrog. Nothing but fists. In England, we have Birdie, who apparently gotten one hell of a tan since this game. An Eagle, who uses Ton Fist because... yeah. Finally in Japan, we have Retsu, who I believe is a Buddhist monk, and Geki, who I call Vega and Ibuki's love child. Now, some of these characters came back in later Street Fighter games, but most of them as of 2014 has yet to come back. Oh, that lineup seems generic. I should also mention that Adon and Sagat are in the game as the sub-boss and the final boss respectively, but I'll get to that a little bit later. Now onto the gameplay. Well, all the battles are best of 3 matches, pretty standard stuff, but these controls are not. Just what were the programmers going for? Everything just feels heavy. Well, your opponent can move faster than you can even push a button. How can I describe the controls best? Imagine NES Castlevania, either Simon Belmont or Trevor. And imagine those controls in a fighting game. It's not fun. You can try your hardest to fight like any other fighting game, but more than likely, you'll have your ass handed back to you on a plate. And because of the controls I mentioned, the easiest way you can even stand a chance is by hitting them as fast as possible and jumping away, or you can duck and attack. And it works. Sometimes. Wait, what happened? Why aren't you attacking? I'm pressing the kick and punch buttons. I'm pressing them. Wow, the controls are really much worse than I said they were. It feels like Ryu respawns when he feels like it. The overall physics of this game make it feel like it's a beta version of Street Fighter as opposed to the finished product. Lee, Retsu, and Joe feel like the easy mode of the game because they're just pretty basic in my opinion. But when Gen, Geki, Mike, and Birdie come out, you're just gonna have one hell of a bad day. Birdie and Mike hit heavy, and I mean heavy. All the opponents take about 6 to 10 hits to get knocked out, but for you, it takes 3 to 5 hits. 3 to 5 hits! It's a really unfair disadvantage that the computer can move a tad too freely. And it feels like you're playing through molasses. What happened there? That shouldn't have connected! I read somewhere that depending on how long you hold the kick or punch button will determine the damage. It was supposed to be like one of the versions of the arcade game, where you can actually do heavy damage depending on how hard you hit these pads. But after doing this numerous of times, I found out that doesn't work. Also, only 2 buttons for a fighting game? Yeah, most common PC Engine controllers only had 2 buttons like the NES and the Master System. However, there were other controllers to make up for this, and this one being the Avenue 6 controller, which not only gives us 6 buttons, but can actually help you win as it does this rapid pause trick. But I don't want to win by using something outside the game. I'm sorry. Plus, despite these extra buttons, only about 4 of them will work at a time. Well, sometimes. In short, this game was clearly meant for 2 buttons. As for the music, it just feels so 80s. Like it wasn't even supposed to be a fighting game. It sounds a bit familiar.
Don't you want me?
I gotta give that one guy in the studio some credit for voicing everybody in this game. Even for something in the 80s, it just feels horribly mixed.
Go to heaven.
What?
Go to heaven.
Go to heaven. And wow, that's some great dialogue after winning or losing. It's so great, it's repeated. A lot.
Friends, but don't forget there are many gods like you all over the world.
Why do I feel like the voice actor is just eating food during ADR? You're probably wondering why I'm not showing any footage of Adon and Sagat. It's f***ing impossible! When I was saying the physics and the controls were terrible, I really mean it. Geki teleports and you have to guess where he is. But he throws shurikens, which can only be blocked with perfect timing. Gen is just unreasonably speedy. And besides being able to hit heavy, Mike and Birdie can knock you out even when you're ducking and they're standing. Feels like blocking only works for the computer. And I heard in order to beat Sagat, you really need to rely on the special moves. But how you do them is beyond me. I read the instruction manual and it looks like it's done the same way in later games, but it never works. Since I first tried this game out, I tried so hard to make the special moves happen. With plenty of practice, you think I'd be able to pull them off or even get to Adon and Sagat, but this game only gives us 2 continues. Only 2? I'm sorry, but no fighting game should ever lack infinite continues. I was irritated when the Mortal Kombat games did it, and I sure as hell hate it here. If this game was well balanced, I wouldn't have minded this. And really, Dynamite? Is this where Final Fight got it from? After playing this, I am surprised that there was even a Street Fighter 2. This game is beyond horrible. I know it's the first Street Fighter game, but a bad game is a bad game, regardless if Capcom or whoever made it. Even the movie Time Game, which is one of the weirdest things I ever seen, was better than this. But that's for another day. Well, it's hard to believe that the first CD video game is relatively unplayable. Yes, and this is the first game to be ever put on a CD. And it blows hard. I'm sure the arcade version is much better, but I'm guessing by not much. Capcom surprisingly never tried to redo this and fix what was wrong with it. I mean, they have like remakes and rehashes of all the other Street Fighter games like Street Fighter 2 and the Alpha series, and they're already great games, so why rehash what's not broken and then leave the weakest one to die? If you have the odd need to play this game, I suggest buying it on the Wii Virtual Console. It's the cheapest way to do it, especially since everything you need to play it on the TurboGrafx or the PC Engine will cost you big time. Or you can find the arcade version on Capcom Classic Collection Volume 2, which can be on Xbox or PS2. Street Fighter 1, Fighting Street, whatever the hell they want to call it. It's probably not only the worst Street Fighter game I ever played, but possibly the worst fighting game I ever played. But that's a talk for another time. This is Remember This, and thanks for watching.